All right, I just needed to bring the participants up so I could see like hands and stuff, so this will work.
Okay, it's going live now.
Leanne, that's hard to keep track of. We might want to actually just raise our hands. I don't know. It's up to you.
I can't see everybody though.
Correct.
Oh, now I can. Just move your like drag your panel across so that you can see everyone at the same time.
I did. Oh, look at that.
Very slick.
No, I need more direction than that.
So like, see where you can see Leanne's screen?
Yeah.
And then along the side, like along the right-hand side, there's like a row of people, but you can't see everyone.
Mine are on top.
Mine are on top too.
Mine too.
Okay. So then at the top, there should be like a little, like a gray bar that if you, with two tiny lines on it in between Leanne's screen and the people.
That gray bar is only going to show up if they've changed to the side-by-side mode.
Okay, so at the very top, is that Tristan? He knows more than I do. At the very top, you can see you are viewing Leanne's screen and then view options.
Yeah.
And then
So go to view options and click on side by side.
I don't have an option. I have fit to window and exit full screen.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
Yep.
It must be, are you guys all using your Chromebooks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
that
why.
would do it.
Never mind then. I can't help you.
But April, you're gonna want to change yours to fit to window. Probably. Otherwise you're seeing like a version.
Window. Got it.
All right. Are we ready to kick this off?
We are.
Yep.
Okay. Well, welcome. It's our first Zoom workshop meeting. It is Thursday, April 2nd. Can I please have the attendance for tonight?
Yes. Miss Durgan?
Here.
Mrs. Giftos?
Here.
Dr. Gill?
Here.
Miss Casalonis?
Here.
Miss Layton?
Here.
Mrs. Seither?
Here.
Mrs. Turner?
Here.
Miss Caldwell? And Mr. Bennett.
Ooh, did I do this? And if you could please join Principal Kelly Crosby for their Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning. My name is Upper School. Today is Thursday, April 2nd. Mrs. Crosby here with your morning announcements. Would you all please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Morning's announcements are that today is the 130th day of school. It's our 14th day of distance learning, and we are nearing the end of week 2 of our formal distance learning plan. The word for today is accomplish. Accomplish. In Spanish, the word is logra, and in French, it is accompli. Tomorrow, I'm going to read you a book called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. Here's the cover for a little preview. So this book is about a 14-year-old boy, William Kamkwamba, living in Malawi, Africa, and he pursued his dream to bring electricity and therefore water to his drought-ridden, very, very poor village in Africa. Tomorrow, I'm looking forward to sharing this book with you. It's really fantastic, and it's nonfiction, but it's beautifully illustrated and told almost poetically. It's a very beautiful book. So I'm excited to share this with you. And thinking about the word accomplish, our word for the day. I'm also going to try to accomplish sending the morning announcements directly to your emails tomorrow. I think I have a way to do that. So that's what I'm going to work on accomplishing. So please wish me luck and check your email, Wentworth students, tomorrow for the morning announcement. Fingers crossed, figured out. So today, please think about this. If you really want to do something, accomplish something, you'll find a way. If you don't, you'll find an excuse. So go for it and make a great day.
All right.
That was great.
It really was. So now I'd like to turn this over to Tristan Snyder. He's our network and telecom administrator, who's going to give us an overview on how to better use the Zoom product.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. First and foremost, the elephant in the room here is that I don't have a webcam, and I'm the one that's supposed to be demonstrating everything over Zoom. So pardon that, but hopefully my voice will be able to carry this. So Zoom, I'm sure you have been getting sort of slowly familiar with the feature set, and the biggest sort of barrier that I've been noticing around for anybody trying to communicate either problems that they've been experiencing or how to do something is the terminology. So I think a good overview would be going through the different types of meetings that you can have and what all the terms mean that surround a Zoom either webinar or meeting. So first and foremost, everybody sort of colloquially refers to this as a meeting when it's, if you want to get really technical about it, it's a webinar. So in the Zoom ecosystem, a webinar behaves very differently from a normal meeting. So the first thing I would sort of draw to everyone's attention is that depending on the platform that you're on, so it sounds like some folks are on Chromebooks, so the sort of descriptions might be not a direct translation, but if you float your mouse towards the bottom of the Zoom window, you should have a gray bar that comes up that basically gives you a number of different options for muting yourself, unmuting yourself, starting or stopping your video, and also a participants icon. And if you click that, it'll pop open a window on the side that gives you a list of panelists and also attendees. So this is where like I said, the terminology here becomes very important. So different people will have different roles or permissions in a given Zoom meeting. So you'll notice, for instance, here we have a total of 12 panelists. And then next to 3 of the panelists, you'll see sort of in parentheses, you'll see yourself listed as me. You'll see Diane as the host, and then you'll also see Kelly as co-host. And essentially, breaking this down further, they are given different permissions for the meeting as well as different feature sets depending on their role, but they're all considered panelists. And then if you click on attendees, which is right next to panelists, you'll see we have 1 currently, and that is someone that has joined via the public registration option. So that would be someone that's noticed on the website that there's going to be a meeting that they would like to participate in and offer comment for. So this attendee, you'll notice, has no presence in the webinar properly. There's no video or audio, but when called upon, they can actually sort of integrate themselves into the meeting in a variety of different ways. So again, you've got panelists and you've got attendees for specifically the webinar. And then in the meeting world, you basically just have participants for the meeting. So everybody is essentially the same there with different roles that can be assigned as needed. And what I'd like to do kind of at this point, if it's okay, is share my screen and give you a little overview here. But I believe we'll have to stop sharing the current screen for me to do that. So if we could get that one down, perfect. So I'll share mine up. And just let me know if you can see this okay, and if it's a good size for everybody to read. Yep, okay. So this is probably one of the nicer breakdowns that I've been able to find for the different roles and the different permission sets. And again, it's important to remember that these are to be considered more technical roles, not necessarily administrative roles. So the first couple of town council meetings on the town side, I was the host and the co-host and pretty much every role there was, because we were just getting that up and going. But I will say that it doesn't necessarily correspond to authoritative or administrative roles. So I had Tom, the town manager, there with me in the meeting, but I was not necessarily running the show, even though my title was host. So that's an important distinction to make right off the bat. And then further down here, you can see that co-hosts are essentially a host that has the ability to go through and change people's roles. So for instance, taking attendees and bumping them up to panelist, or just giving them permission to speak and share their thoughts on the webinar that's occurring. And then there are a few other, sort of administrative rights that are given out for co-hosts. So sharing a screen is one of them, that they can actually go in and physically stop someone from sharing a screen. So if there's something inappropriate that somehow gets passed, somebody can swoop in and stop that from being broadcast. And you'll see that panelists here, like that would be my current role in this particular webinar. We're sort of at the mercy of the co-hosts and hosts to assign, screen sharing permissions, or potentially being administratively muted or anything else. And then you'll notice that attendees basically have no rights. So they can be called upon. You can get an audio input from them, kind of like a phone call. And you'll notice the chat is one of the options here. And we've actually sort of decided amongst ourselves that chat doesn't really fit the forum, for the webinar that we're trying to match in the meetings. So that's something that we've actually disabled. And then moving down further here, you can see that essentially, host and co-host have the exact same permissions in terms of managing members of the meeting, or managing microphones, video, sharing screens, that type of thing, removing attendees and invites as well. So that's just sort of an overview. It's terminology and roles are really the most important thing to remember. And I've had a pretty in-depth discussion with the planning department over here, and they've started to break meetings down into having somebody basically just be the administrator, and somebody just be the host, and someone that just deals with scheduling. And what you can do, instead of having this this administrative burden all put on one individual, roles basically allow you to spread that amongst yourselves, and make it best fit for the meeting that you're going to hold. And definitely you don't have to throw all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. So you can sort of diffuse that. The other thing that I'll say is the biggest sort of more difficult sort of setup initially, and this depending on who's hosting the meeting and who wants to be scheduling the meeting, or the webinar rather, this would be something that we can go over in more detail as needed. But for the most part, I think we wanted to keep the workshop pretty generic and pretty basic, just for individuals that were going to be conducting themselves in an active webinar, not necessarily the registration piece around it. So I have a document that's basically getting passed around for anybody that would find themselves in a position where they would need to be host, as well as anybody that would need to do the scheduling to generate links to get that up on the website. So that's just something to keep in mind, that that duty can be sort of delegated off, and it doesn't have to all fall in the hands of one individual. So a few other things I'll say is that one of the features that I've noticed that folks haven't really been exploring is when they're going to share, they essentially will share an entire view of their desktop. They click the share screen, and then they share out. They click the blue button, and it just defaults to sharing an entire monitor. you can actually share specific applications or windows. So you can, you can still function and have your desktop there performing whatever action you'd like, and then just share, for instance, I could break out one tab of this browser and just share that specific tab. So I don't have to give you a full view of my entire workflow and what I'm doing kind of behind the scenes. I can share out specifically one item, and if that's a PowerPoint presentation, or if it's a Chrome tab that I keep, that I browse around with, that's probably one of the coolest features that I've found. And it definitely makes things a little bit cleaner, especially in a more formal setting. So the other thing that may become a useful feature for folks is if someone's sharing a screen, you can actually request on the panelist side, you can request control of it. So if somebody has content that hasn't been shared out to the rest of the folks, or if they have a specific login to something and it comes up in the webinar or the meeting that you'd like to actually demonstrate how to use that content, and there might be somebody more knowledgeable in the in the midst, they can invite somebody to take control and actually operate the person that's presenting screen. So they can actually go in and move around and click different items and navigate for them. So that's something else that I've noticed in a few of these that's been very handy.
Hey, Kristen, is it possible to show how to do that? Because I think that would really come in handy, especially tonight.
Okay. Yeah, so what I'll do, so I'm currently sharing. So I have a menu at the top that basically says remote control. And then I can give my mouse and keyboard to, and I'll say, let's say Diane here. So Diane should have gotten a prompt, hopefully.
Right, so it says I can control Tristan's screen.
Yep.
And so now if I wanted.
So now she's doing the scrolling here.
Scrolling through this, right? Or if I wanted to click on this other window, I can. So now, like, I've remotely taken over this. And so Tristan, like when you showed me this last week, this feature, I kind of compared it in my own head to other times where I might have had to call tech support for something. And, the technician might say, I'm going to take over your screen remotely for a minute and, do something for you. That was what the comparison that I drew.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great, just because you're used to being in a sort of in-person meeting and setting, you can just pass the set of papers and have somebody else look for it. It's like, oh yeah, it's right here. I can shuffle through this and find it, or somebody else can bring it up on their laptop and show it or display it. So this is a similar sort of feature set to compare it. It's like, hey, do you mind if I drive and I take a look really quick? I think I can find it. So that's definitely very useful.
For our purposes, like this seems like would be a good way for us to share the slideshow.
Correct.
We all take different roles during during a meeting, and we all discuss our individual slides. And so whoever's sharing their screen could just pass that control to the person who's speaking about that slide.
I wasn't clear on the process for how to share only a specific part of your screen.
Me either.
Yep, sure. So if you select share at the bottom, what it'll do is it'll present you with a list of different windows that it's found that are open. And then you would just select the exact window. So
Tristan, can you stop sharing your screen so that when we click share screen, we get the menu?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It says desktop or application.
Yep. And on your side, I think if you're on a Chromebook, I'm not sure how granular you can get with that, but on the Windows side and the Mac side, it'll basically look at what windows are open and separate on the device, and then offer those up as individual things to share out.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. one other thing, so just when you have a lot of individuals and you know these conferences might grow as sort of time goes on, but one thing we've noticed is that having the ability to raise hands is very useful, which is why at the top of this I sort of directed everyone over to the participant view, so you get an overview of who's essentially in the meeting and what their status is. It's also handy to see if someone you know, is muted ahead of time. You know, you can butt in and say, hey, I noticed that you're muted, we can't hear you. So that's handy as well. But the particular feature would be raising your hand, and that's at the bottom right. So I can actually demo that. So you just basically tap it and it'll raise your hand. So if you've got somebody that's, you know, like me, that's basically doing a significant amount of presenting, it's nice to have that participant view open just so you can get an idea for if anyone else is looking to contribute or going around getting a feel for if there's something that might have been gleaned over or missed. And that works for you know, panelists, you know, sort of in the meeting, but it also works on the attendee side when you're requesting public comment. It's nice, you know, we have a very small amount of attendees for this specific conference, but if you had, you know, 15 or 20 folks stacked in there, having somebody go through and look to see if anyone's hand is raised, you know, do you have anything that you'd like to say, then that the management of that becomes much simpler. And then in the case of Diane and Kelly, they would have permission on their end to go in and see if a hand is raised on one of the attendees to allow them to speak. So you can bring them in, and then, you know, they have their 3-5 minutes, whatever the time period is, and then you can sort of remove that ability after, so they can come in and then leave.
We actually try that with one of our attendees, because both of our attendees are members of our team. And I wonder if there would be value in just kind of test driving that during this workshop.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We can demonstrate that. So if you, Diane, if you hover over, see Kate has sort of raised her hand there. There should be the option to allow to speak or allow to talk.
All right, so let's try that first. Hey, Kate.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, that worked.
And then there's also the video option, right? I
Right.
can promote her to a panelist for whatever amount of time, you know, for the time of her comment. So.
Correct. Yep, exactly right. So the first, you know, the more simple version is allowing them to talk, and that's the less risky version. So, you know, assuming that these are public individuals and you're not necessarily knowing, you know, who they are and where they came from, the first option, allowing them to talk, is very low risk. The second option, where you're promoting them to panelists and they can share their screen and they can, you know, represent themselves visually, that's the higher risk chance there. So
especially with me.
So
big trouble.
Right.
And then it's really just a matter of when we think that Kate is done talking,
you can boot me.
We can change her back and she can go back to the attendee list.
Right, exactly. So I believe the verbiage is change role to attendee on the side there. Yep. So that would be that, you know, that pretty much sums up the administrative, you know, moderation part of this. Those features are probably about 90% of the learning curve.
So here's another question, Tristan. So in regards to hosts and co-hosts, can we have more than 2 people?
Oh yeah, definitely. So if you wanted
I'm
to,
just thinking like it would be like helpful for like Leanne, as an example, to be a co-host so that she could see those features, or you know, even April as the vice chair. What are your thoughts about that, everyone? I'm not sure if April or Leanne is talking. You were on mute.
No, sorry, I unmuted. I think it would be helpful. Does the co-host and the host have the same functionality?
So essentially a co-host has the same moderation permission set as the host. So the host has can basically end the webinar and can also stream out to YouTube and control some recording settings and a few other things. The co-host, for all the features that we were demonstrating, can do effectively the exact same thing as the host.
Yeah, so to me, for a full board meeting like this, it makes sense, Diane, to have you as host and Leanne as co-host, and I don't think we need much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I just, my wonder was just if it would be helpful, for either or both of you to be able to have access to, that attendee feature when Tristan was saying, to be able to move people in and out or to recognize, who's raising their hand or wanting to make a comment from that attendee list.
Yeah, I could see advantages to that for sure.
I was just going to throw in just on a, if anything happened and you needed to step in on it, it would probably make a lot of sense to be comfortable with the navigation and just seeing how it's different.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was also thinking if there was, as we do this, if there are people who plan on hosting committee meetings, it would be good to be kind of a watching co-host,
right?
Just to kind of train, so that what the platform looks like before you try and host your own meeting.
Yep.
Agreed.
Can we change? I have a question. Can we change the roles as far as host and co-host once the meeting has started?
Yeah. So
both. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Just
co-host
right
can
now.
only.
Check to see if your features are different, April.
Oh yeah. Yep. Co-host me. Oh yeah. Look at all this stuff I could do now. Polls.
So Diane, do you know if there are any other features or pitfalls that you were noticing for anyone? I know I think Sandy had issues connecting in or getting everything straightened out on that side, but as far as the utilization of Zoom and navigating the feature set there, was there anything that you thought that folks were lacking?
No, I think the only other piece that we probably should just spend a little time talking about is the Q&A feature that we are utilizing, just so that people are comfortable and knowledgeable in terms of how that's set up.
I also just want to verify, because the last time we talked about this, we had talked about promoting people to panelists who wanted to share a public comment. Are we now just giving them the voice option?
We just did it with Kate. We brought her up to panelist.
I know, but I think
I
am really cognizant of Tristan saying that it's a safer option to have people's voices, because we don't know where they are and what's in their homes and what might be in the background. And
yeah, I agree with that, Hillary. I think we should maybe discuss and come to some kind of consensus that when we promote people that aren't, members of our team, that we do so without video.
Right. I guess I was looking for clarification on whether that was a decision that had been made.
I think that's totally up to you as a board in terms of how you want to do that. A question I would have is, would you see a difference in members of the admin team that might be called to speak and having them be on video? Or
I think they would be promoted to panelists because they're members of our team. They've been like, quote, vetted kind of by us. But in terms of members of the public who are going to present public comment, I think my vote would be to have it audio only.
Yeah, I agree with you, Hillary.
Me too, based on the horror stories that I've heard.
I agree.
I have a question about now that I'm co-host. I can't figure out how to raise my hand.
So that is an unfortunate side effect
Oh.
of being a co-host that we sort of discovered. There is no raising hand as a co-host.
Okay,
It's
so that would
odd,
definitely
but
be a downside to promoting.
Definitely
to-
don't make me a co-host.
Purposely make it
All of
hard.
us, 'cause I was thinking if we just- I was thinking if we just did everybody co-host, then we would all have the same controls. But if everybody's a co-host, then nobody can raise their hand.
Right.
But honestly, like the way, I don't know if other people, I have two screens because I'm in like Matt's work setup, and all of the information about the panelists and the attendees are like kind of over here. And I don't notice when people have their hands up. Like I would have to be constantly looking for it. I don't know if anyone else has that same issue. There's no like alert that somebody put their hand up.
yeah, there's no audio cue that that there's some action, but that could be, when you think about it, the audio cue could be abused. If there was somebody in it as an attendee just sitting there raising and lowering over and over again, driving everybody bonkers. So I can see where they were going with that, and that's why I think having a dedicated, basically like moderator role, somebody that has that view open and is just sort of checking it out is beneficial, just so everybody doesn't have to sit there and comb over that.
I don't like not being able to raise my hand. That's because if I'm not one of the top 4 things on somebody's screen, like I could raise my hand and everyone who's looking at my screen can see it, but otherwise I'm just sitting here with my hand up, and if I'm not one of the people that Leanne's looking at, she has no way to know that I'm raising my hand.
I can say that with the way that I have my stuff set up, similar to Hillary, I'm actually running on 3 because I have both monitors and the laptop up, so I have video. I will have a full view of who's on. It may get a little questionable if we have a lot of people pop in during other sections, but I can keep an eye on looking for you.
Okay. I have another really specific question, Tristan.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a way, once you have connected and you have connected your computer audio, sometimes mine gets, like I get a really bad feedback and I want to switch to my phone. Is there a way to switch from using your computer audio to calling in? I can't figure out how to disconnect my computer audio.
So on the bottom left, right by the mute button, there's an arrow. And one of those options, it lists probably about 10 or 15 different things, but towards the bottom, there's a switch to phone audio option.
Yep.
And that's the one that you want. And that'll actually, it'll call your phone, and then you can dial in that way.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you.
And so what I'll do now is basically just sort of touch on the Q&A piece. If you notice right by the participants icon in the center, there's this Q&A blurb that looks like 2 chat bubbles talking back and forth. This is essentially we had demoed this, I think, in our first run, but it's essentially a way for folks that if they don't have some sort of microphone, or they don't feel comfortable talking in as an attendee into everything, they can basically just voice a question in here. And this is open for attendees to see. We've made some adjustments so that attendees can't see other questions and sort of have a dialogue back and forth and use it as an open forum, because it looks like that could have been an avenue that people could just sort of spam stuff in there. But we have it available for folks if they do want to post a question or specifically a public comment. They can go in there and you can see Kate just posted in one. Then that will serve as a way to facilitate communication from the public when these sort of Zoom conferences are being held. and it was quickly dismissed. So
Thank you, Kate, for doing that. I wanted to test it out.
and in addition to that, there is an email that is set up as a group to go out if there is any public comment and they don't necessarily want to join in on Zoom, they can just shoot an email. So that's also an option.
How are we monitoring that, Leanne? Do you have that open?
I do not.
So it actually is set up so that it would drop into all of our emails
Right.
simultaneously. It's so that any one of us, as long as we had our email up, would be able to see those coming in.
So it'll be an excuse if I have my phone and I look at it. Great. Because I do get little notices, so I can try to keep an eye on that too.
Also, I mean, we have to remember that during a regular meeting, public comment is only during a very specific time.
Right.
So, you know, we have to look at the emails during that time, and we have to look at the attendees during that time to see if they have their hands up, and the Q&A during that time. But once that time is over, that doesn't need to be monitored any longer.
Right.
Right. And I think, I don't know if anyone was able to see the town council meeting last night on YouTube, but Paul did a really great job setting the expectations for public comment, you know, right at the start, talking about how it wasn't going to be sort of like this interactive back and forth. And if folks were raising their hands, it's not expected that they immediately need to get called on. It's more, you know, it's an indication or a cue that when the time comes in the, you know, in the agenda, that then they're sort of, then they are asked to provide comment. It's not a shout that they're providing. So it's more of a call and response.
And I think just raising your hand is the equivalent of queuing up to go up to the podium, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's good to make sure people understand that if they have their hand up during the middle of the meeting when it's not public comment time, nothing's going to happen.
Right. Yep. So, and that's why we've been making adjustments, especially to chat, and as well to how attendees are registered for the webinars, just to reduce any sort of interference that can happen, just so that the meetings can run as smoothly as possible. So if there are any grievances or adjustments that anyone feels does need to be made, I'm definitely, I'm available. You could voice the suggestions and we can take a look and, is it technically possible? I think the only issue that is insurmountable is the co-host raising their hand issue. So that's, first and foremost, the only thing that from the tech side can't be solved. But anything else, if you notice that the QA feature doesn't work out, that can be altered or removed entirely. So, I mean, there are more tweaks and changes that can be made to better tailor everything. So, like I said, just so that things can run as optimally as possible. And with that, I guess I'll ask if anyone has any other sort of technical or feature questions that I could answer, or if there was any question on roles or permissions or scheduling or anything like that that I could address. All right, I see no hands. So I will turn it back to, I believe it was Leanne.
Thank you, Tristan.
Thank you, Tristan.
Thank you.
This was awesome. I'm pretty excited. I'm going to hope that I haven't forgotten things by the time we actually start our official meeting at 7 o'clock. With that said, if there is nothing else, we have about an 18-minute break before our meeting officially starts. If we do sign out, if we can try to get back in like maybe 5 minutes of 7, just to make sure that we all launch and are on deck and ready to go.
Is it it's a separate meeting though, right?
It is a separate meeting.
Okay.
It has a separate login, right?
Yeah.
Leanne, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Based on the conversation we just had about adding co-host for the budget workshop tomorrow, do you want me to go ahead and add you and April as co-host?
Sure. And if we could probably add Sarah as the finance chair.
Okay. I can do that.
Please.
That's all I had.
Okay. All right. Motion to adjourn for the next 15 minutes.
So moved. Second.
Second.
All right, and we will need to do votes, and I will mention this in the beginning of the next meeting. Votes are going to be taken by a roll call. So if we could start that, Diane.
You're on mute.
Do we have to take a roll call to adjourn a workshop?
Yeah, because we have to vote on it.
Voting.
I thought we just always ended it normally.
No, we do. Well, most of our workshops run right until we kind of bleed over in our meeting. But if we're closing out a meeting, we're supposed to be voting to agree to close it out.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Durgan? You agree? Yes.
What do you want me to say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes or
Yeah.
no?
Yes. Anything other than meh.
What do you want me to say in order for me to close the meeting?
Please say yes.
Mrs. Giftos?
Yes.
Dr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. Casalonis?
Yes.
Ms. Layton?
Yes.
Mrs. Seither?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
And Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Great.
Great. Thank you. See you guys in a little bit.